Okay, we'll go ahead and call to order the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly Work Session Thursday, December 28th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. and we are in the Assembly chambers. First item on the agenda is citizens' comments. The local number is 907-486-3231. Toll-free number is 1-855-492-9202, and these are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Anybody wishing to come forward or call in, please do at this time. We'll wait a minute, see if half a minute. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the agenda items for discussion on the work session. First one is discuss resolution FY 2024-11, adopting a state legislative capital improvements project priority list for the 2024 legislative session. Staff report, anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Assembly. At the last meeting where we spoke about the CIP list, it was asked for staff to create a resolution based on Assembly Member Sherritt's list. That's what you have listed first. After that list, there is a spreadsheet of all of them put together in the order that Mr. Sherritt suggested. And then after that is the a kind of a clean look at what our resolution would be, and then the planning and zoning resolution is in after that. In the beginning, because Megan Christensen has worked on these resolutions in the past, I asked her to go in there and take a look and see if we were headed in the right direction or if she had any comments. So you'll see in pink on the right-hand side, she's added some comments just based on information that we need, whether it's has the city gotten any funding for this project, or kind of pointing out who the communities are working with these projects on, or if it's federal funding they're looking for, or state funding, and just kind of reminding us that we're supposed to be focused on state funding for this resolution. So you'll see some of those comments in there. So I don't think we've developed any further rating criteria since the last time we looked at this. So just interested to see what the Assembly thinks about the list that was assembled from Mr. Sherritt's comments.
Discussion. Assembly. No fighting over who goes first. Scott.
If we go to Kodiak Island Borough Resolution number FY 2024-11, is this the second one is staff's modification of?
That is just the order in which Mr. Sherritt wanted to see the items listed.
No, the third one then. The resolution, FY 2024-11.
Yeah, that's his desire put into a resolution.
So the first one is the staff's version of that?
The first one is just with Megan's comments. She's participated in that process for over 15 years, so we wanted her to weigh in on the projects that were on there, or I asked her to do that.
Okay, in the first one, the St. Herman Harbor thing is in. It's not in the second one.
That wasn't in the list that Brian asked us to do. That list is exactly laid out on the way that Ryan wanted it to. So that St. Herman Harbor obviously is in that list, but when he made that list, we did health and safety first. And so St. Herman Harbor it just didn't follow in the matrix of what he asked for. That's not saying you can't add it, but this is just the version that he asked for.
The Assembly didn't vote on that at
No.
all? Okay.
So on basically what I'm seeing on Sherritt's list of CIP is 1 through 44. But as part of the resolution 2411, I only see 1 through 35.
Mr. Chair asked for two things. One, a resolution with those things listed, and two, a combined list. Remember, he made a spreadsheet and brought it in and then shared it with us, but that spreadsheet had duplicates and overlaps because it was our version plus planning and zoning's version plus his matrix version. And so that list is just cleaned up so that every project is listed once on there. And then it's divided in the spreadsheet in accordance with the category that it falls into. He made those categories of healthcare, roads, schools, life health, electrical, so that's all listed in there. It was the first attempt at trying to come up with a matrix to try to weigh which ones we'd want to include in the list and which ones we wouldn't. So he wanted two resolutions, one, the short one, and the second thing he wanted was a list with all of them in there. And so that's what staff provided tonight.
And so the list is the 1 through 44
Yes.
on there. Discussion. Well, I'm going to say I'm not interested in sending 44 projects to the legislators, but that's my personal opinion. I think this needs to be cut down substantially to, on there. So I'm looking for discussion to see what you guys would like. Bo?
All right, I can kick it off. Mr. Turner's comment still rings very well with me in that I don't feel the need to remove anything from the outlying or outer communities as far as their wish list is concerned. That said, I do disagree with some of the ranking in here. I mean, I don't know how far we want to take this. I agree. There's no chance a lot of these are going to get funded, but I do think if these other communities want to have this presented to the legislature, we should honor that. But there is some level of scrutiny I think we should attempt to dive into. I don't know how deep we go, but I don't remember who mentioned it before, but I think putting priority number three, I disagree with right out of the gate here, $10 million for a commercial truck route improvement over life and safety or health and safety items that are below that you could probably fund 10 of those for this one improvement. So I'll lean on my colleagues here to see, or my peers, about whittling the list down. I still agree with Mr. Turner that we should not. However, some level of prioritization should happen, but that is a lot of items to shuffle.
One of the things we had discussed before too is that the outlying communities, including the city of Kodiak, are allowed to, they submit their own list, complete list also. It's not like we're the only ones submitting it for them. So I think we should do it. Something there. I agree with you. There's several things that can come off, and the outlying communities list needs to be pared down there. I'm going to say first one to take off is number 38. It's $25 million airport, City of Port Lions Airport Expansion Project. And the reason I say that needs to come off is we don't have $56 million on this list, nor have we ever had it, for the state airport locally here. That's the minimum that the work that they've been looking at for over a 3-year period, which they keeps getting pushed off, just like the Port Lions one does. So, how much do you want to get in? If we're going to get into the airport in Port Lions, then you might as well get into the airport here in town. That's the state. We have nothing to say what the state does on the airports. Amy?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I reversed those. The first one is Mr. Sherritt's suggested list, that shorter list. And then you have his Excel spreadsheet. And then that third one that's in there is the one that we started with when we started talking about it. So the first one that's listed in the packet that starts on page 2 there, that is the list that Mr. Sherritt requested. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
I'm looking at one on page 10.
That's Ryan's spreadsheet. That's just the spreadsheet, that's not.
That's all the projects, correct?
Yeah, but that's his spreadsheet.
Okay,
It's just a spreadsheet.
right, it's a list of the projects. Bo,
So, thank you, Amy. I need to backtrack quite a bit then on my previous comment, so please disregard.
But your comment is still great. It's just, that's the, yeah, so when Mr. Sherritt put together the category lists and he picked the health and safety and how to prioritize those, that first one is the order that he requested. And then it is confusing because they all look the same and they have the same numbers. But that first one is what Mr. Sherritt asked, and then his whole entire list with all the projects. And then that second one is kind of where we started. That was the list that came after planning and zoning. It got pared down in that matter. So then I asked for all the planning and zoning projects to be brought forward so the assembly could see the entire list. And so that's the planning and zoning whole entire list is in there as well.
okay, so what I'm looking at is page 4 through 9 is the resolution FY 24-11.
Through 8 or 7.
I have through 9,
9 includes the,
the signature page.
it's not what I have.
Digital is 2 through
6.
6.
Okay, well, I got the printed version.
Well, you don't count.
What a
Nor
bad.
do you vote.
Oh, be careful. So basically, there's, I'm going to read it off for the public because I don't think they have a clue there. First one is St. Herman's Harbor Infrastructure Replacement, Phase 1 and 2, 16 million, Phase 3 and 4, 40 million. The next one is the hospital facility sterilizer and boiler replacement, $1 million. Next is Kodiak Community Health Center expansion. Estimated total project cost $25,850,000. Funding acquired $8,317,901.
Wastewater treatment.
So, 6, oh, I see. 86, 87. Design is, cost is $1.2 million for that. Okay, then the Kodiak wastewater treatment plant facility, estimated cost $1.9 million. And then City of Larson Bay Reservoir spillway, $1.2 million. City of Port Lions water distribution system replacement, $8 million. City of Old Harbor septic tank replacement, $100,000. City of Port Lions fire station insulation, $35,000. Community of Kodiak water tank installation, $250,000. City of Port Lions disaster and emergency preparedness, $50,000. And that's it. Jared.
Yeah, can we talk about this last one, the Port Lion disaster emergency preparedness? There's much in this one that's not a capital project. It's training, it's gear. These are disaster preparedness survival items. These are all important things, but these aren't related to a capital project. The third paragraph, lines 202 through 205, as Megan noted, this is something that is in the previous fire station installation request there, and that's just leaving the tsunami warning sirens not connected to permanent electricity as really, I think, the only thing. And I don't know if that even ranks high enough to be on a capital improvement project list. So a lot of these other ones, they sound fine to me, but this last one here, I have some issues with, if it even meets the criteria of the list to begin with. Is Megan here? Oh, okay.
No. Further discussion? Scott?
Madam Manager, do we know if these have been vetted in any way, shape, or form?
We don't have a specific system we do ask them if their city, they have been vetted by their communities. So their city councils and stuff approve them before they go to planning and zoning to get added to their list. But there is no specific, like, when was this project bid, or how did you come to these numbers? There's no direct guidelines on finding out how new or accurate that information is. They are approved by their communities when they come to us, but we don't ask those kinds of questions about how the information was found out.
Bo?
Okay, let me try this again. So first off, thank you, Ryan. I'm sure you're listening or streaming this at some point. I appreciate the time you spent packaging this up, and now that I know what I'm looking at, I agree with Mr. Sherritt's priorities in that these are all largely health and safety items. So I'm still looking through the lens of prioritizing the needs over the nice to haves or wants, and health and safety will always rank number one for me. In addition to the harbor infrastructure project, which falls under several categories that I think we can all agree, safety is one of them, and supporting our fisheries is extremely important. I do agree with Mr. Griffin. I can't really force the fit for the, let me get down to there, the Port Lions, is it Port Lions? Pardon me, I'm scrolling here. Where were we there? The fire, you're right, the disaster preparedness, I agree. Important as it is, it's redundant in part, and it doesn't fit the usual criteria for capital improvement, but the rest of the list as is, I support.
Jared?
I think I might make a recommendation to delete the disaster emergency preparedness for City of Port Lions one, and I think we should have at least one roads project on there in case somehow money becomes available through DOT or something, and who knows? They might look at it and say, hey, do you guys have a road project that you need
Are you
that's on
saying
your
a state
list?
project or local roads?
Well, I think I'm open to discussion on that. There's the
There's the-
Anton Larson one, there's the Women's Bay one.
Well, the problem is, there's the service district one, which is 10,500,000.
Right.
And that's the one that you would go for, because all 4 road service districts
Yeah,
are in there.
and I think that would be a fine, I think we should have at least one road project on there. Wait, which number is that one, Scott? Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, okay.
The 10,500,000.
Yeah.
10,500,000.
Yes, 14. Like I said, that's all 4 of the road service districts. They're, you could, there's the, I think it's roughly 5 million on Reznov out at Woman's Bay, which is kind of the bike path, bear viewing type thing. There's a 2 million, I think it is, for pedestrian walkway to North Star.
That one's been on the list for.
Yeah, and I think it's close to being funded.
Okay.
That's probably the closest one on there of any of these on this list. So, anyway,
Is that a motion on your part?
yeah, you can't do a
It's a work
motion.
session,
It's a
but
work session.
I might make that amendment. Propose that amendment.
If it's-
Propose that
if
amendment
it's
next
the
week.
Consensus of the assembly, we can give direction for that to happen. You know, so I'm just looking,
I'm supportive of it.
okay. Bo, Jared?
Of the 10-5?
Take 10-5 and taking the
The other one off.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
would, yeah.
off. James and Steve,
No, wait a minute. Which 10? What do
Number 14.
number 14, which is all the service districts. Putting that in as roads, and then he was suggesting taking the 35 off, was it, Jared? On Port Lions?
Line 189 through,
213.
I think it's 230.
213.
Yeah.
Line 30.
Yeah, but in the resolution, okay.
In this second resolution, the road service project that you're suggesting that we add is on line 168.
In the second resolution.
Right.
Page
But not-
4
but
of the
we're-
second
But
resolution.
if we're.
But they have
But we're
the,
talking about the first one,
Yeah, the first one on the list, which is the shorter version,
yeah.
you're taking out line.
189.
Yes, I already figured that one out. I was just, then I jumped, my brain does that sometimes. I jumped to the one that you are suggesting that we add for the road service, and it's not, it's in the spreadsheet, which we've identified that, but the actual words behind it are in that second resolution on line 168.
Okay. Steve and James, are you in agreement with that?
You're pulling this in.
Of course. Just trying to get a consensus moving forward with that version, or we'll have to do it on the floor next week. James?
Well, I think the only thing that stands out to me is the KCHC expansion. So 25.8 million for the KCHC expansion seems, I mean, they're only asking for 1.2
Right.
funds needed, but
Design.
yeah, but we're talking about the medical center, we're talking about the hospital, and that project's gonna be a lot larger than that, and I'm not sure that that really fits into our, I mean, it's a capital project, but it's really the Providence. It shouldn't say KCHC, it should be a Providence title, even though, I mean, it's the hospital, Kodiak Island Hospital.
Well, the funding acquired, though, was Kodiak Community Health Center.
I get that, but I just have, I don't know.
I know, and it's, it's possibly a $60 million project. So I was thinking of just
he's saying more.
leaving it at the
You have to remember, the high school was built for,
80. 80 was the bond limit.
yeah, 80 was the bond limit, and it went to what, 115?
Nope,
Oh, come on now.
nope. You'd have to ask Nora. It didn't,
So, let's call it 80. We're talking about the same size building if we're going to go up, plus the demolition. It's gonna be in the 125 range, especially with the cost of supplies today.
inflation.
Inflation.
So,
So what's your concern? You don't want 25 on there? You want to have just the design cost?
No, I think it should be a higher number there.
But we're not asking for a higher number, are we, at this point?
No, but
And
it
we
should
won't
say
under
that
these
we're looking at a
conditions.
$125 million project and we're asking for,
Isn't that a different
1.2.
project, though?
Right.
I mean, you've already said that
it's
it's Providence.
kind of a
It's not
whole
KCHC.
thing.
but Providence is the borough. The borough owns the hospital,
I
not
understand.
Providence. So, yeah, I'm thinking it's 2 projects there.
Well, you
And-
can't expand KCHC until Providence is remodeled.
They could build their own
There's
building
option
They could build their own building. Where?
up on top
next
of
to the
the hill.
long-term care center.
Yeah.
Killarney Estates.
No. So there's some options there, and rather than that's another whole discussion, I was thinking by itself. So looking at these numbers of estimated total cost project of 25.8 million, funding approved at 8.3 million, ask estimated design cost 1.2, which on a $25 million project is probably a little bit low as a medical facility. So it was a start. But I need a little bit more consensus over on that end. Which way would you guys like to go? Do you want to change it to a higher number? Or stick with this? I've got 3 of you in favor, 2 undeclared right now.
Yeah. You can leave it. That's fine.
Okay. Steve?
I have a little concern about that whole project. Are they talking about at that same location, different location?
It's open.
Because any expansion at that same location, they already have a huge parking problem. So are they going to just go up and leave the same parking, but are they going to try to serve more people? This is,
Well, I would throw it out originally, Steve, the discussion from a conceptual standpoint was that everything to the left of the newer hospital part gets demolished. Smaller footprint, more parking is then available with a taller building on there, is originally what the conception was. What, for the, and what the thought here is maybe this will be part of it, or maybe it'll be separate. And the borough owns additional land up by the long-term care facility on there, which is an option on there. Amy, you had some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess it's a little bit of the cart before the horse on this one, because we're still waiting for that facility's future study to come back from our consultants. And so we don't really have a good gauge of what they feel our future need is going to be. And so I feel like we're just kind of guessing. I don't want to stop KCHC from getting funding because they see a need and they've done a really good job with fundraising thus far. But I think it's early for us to loop in the whole Providence remodel when we're just not there yet. Just my opinion.
Okay, so with James saying, leave it in there for now, it'll move forward with that. So it'll include the 10.5 on the roads and eliminate the 50,000 emergency preparedness. Okay. Directions given on that one. Moving on to the next,
I have one more point about it. What do
Oh,
we do
sorry, I didn't
about
see that.
Megan's comments?
Well, we'll just ask the, for the ones where she wrote, does the city have any
Does the
funding
city
set
have-
aside? We'll just have to see if they,
have
we
something
will ask
between
the
now
city
and
to
next
see if
week.
they have it.
I was thinking about the ones where she has on line 157 for the city of Port Lions water distribution thing. She's saying that Port Lions is working with ANTHC, not the state. So does that mean that they should be not on this CIP list?
That is what she's suggesting, yes.
Do we want to consider removing that because of that?
At this time, no.
Okay.
So, moving on, discussion of the KFRC saltwater disinfection system funding and authorization to proceed with a request for proposal. Amy?
Thank you. Tonight, we have both Jenna and Dave here to answer questions. This is a very large part of your packet. If you've got a chance to look at it, it kind of gives you the history of how this has come about and why we need this over at that building. Also, you have gotten handouts that include the timeline and our current KFRC project statements for the R&R funds. So you have an idea of how the money has been spent over there. That's all in your packet, and we'll let Dave and Jenna go through the technical aspects of the permit.
Good evening and thank you. I apologize for not being able to have this timeline. We just kind of created it today because this has been going on for so long and some of you have not been involved with it. We figured that a timeline was the best way to go about explaining some of this. I can go through the timeline if you choose. I can hit the highlights.
Go through the timeline, please.
So, December 2019, there was a new director. Robert Foy left, and Mr. Mike Litzow joined as the director over at KFRC for NOAA. And I want to say that by no means are we assigning anything to Mike. Mike just started asking questions as a new director. So consequently, NOAA as the main tenant, 76% of the funds that are paid for leases come from NOAA, from that particular division. And effectively, what his ask was where was the decontamination, saltwater decontamination system functional? And we didn't have an actual answer for that. I did not at the time. But it also stimulated a bunch of other questions. So there was a R&R meeting and a 1217 reconciliation. So a 1217 is a GSA form because technically the lease is with GSA, Government Services Administration. That is a form where you do a catch-up for each year's funding and what was paid and what the cost of the building, expenses, all that. It's a review that's required by the lease annually. So that started, and it identified that in that meeting, those meetings, we identified that this is what's considered in the lease to be a shell item. So it is it is not an appurtenance of the building. It is an actual system that was originally installed in the building. There's quite a bit of difference when you look at the lease language. This conversation went on, and the reason that it is required discharge permit is, number one, it's the federal regulation that anytime you take water from navigable waterway or from an ocean and you do something with it and you discharge back into said ocean, you have to treat it. And I think Mr. Turner could speak to this as well because all of the fish processing plants have a similar permit to this, correct?
Yeah, it just has to be filtered from our standpoint, but because they're in a research facility, it has to be treated further.
Correct. So what they're worried about is discharge of diseases, different things like that. To me, it's a bit ironic because it's the same ocean, but it's the way that this is handled. And they are required to have a captive animal permit where the fish processing facilities are not. We started discussing, so we knew that permit was required. We looked into the ozone machine, the ozonator itself. We brought a consultant up from Arizona who went through the system and basically said, look, we can fix your system, but it hasn't run for the 23 years that it's been installed. So there are two components that are on this system that show there was a 40-hour run in one and a 79-hour run in another. So that's not a lot of time considering it was supposed to run 24/7 for 23 years. The guy said, hey, we can fix this thing, but it might last a day, it might last a week, it might last 2 years, and by the way, we can't buy parts. So we sort of abandoned that one at the get-go without any discussion. He also provided us with a cost to put in an ozone system. However, ozone has its own little idiosyncrasies. Your oxygen generators burn out quickly. There's a whole lot of parts and pieces, and your annual costs are higher. We didn't want to go with a vendor's opinion because this is a company that sells ozone equipment for decontamination, mostly of swimming pools. So consequently, we thought at the same time we had a relationship with an engineering firm in Anchorage called CRW. And how we got engaged with CRW was having the discussions involved with the well at Kodiak. So while they were on board, we asked them, because they're heavily into the water, wastewater side of things, we asked them to subtly have a conversation with and for us with the ADEC, because the last thing that staff wanted to do was trigger a monumental fine from the EPA because we never had a required APDES permit. So with their help and with contacts that both myself and Jenna have developed over the years with ADEC, we kind of quietly asked the question, and at the same time, past assemblies have directed us to move forward, so we now have the APDES permit in place. We didn't get fined for it for 23 years of not complying, so I think that was a bonus for us. But what it does is it shows that we need to do something more robust for decontamination. In the meantime, we used a chlorination system to make sure that we would be compliant, which we monitor on a regular basis. We have a sodium hypochlorite injection. We also know that there's enough contact time to be able to kill the pathogens. I realize I'm kind of off of this, but it's easier for me to tell the story. What we got from CRW was an analysis, and if you turn the page, on page 2 and 3, you'll see that the cost of an ozone system, they estimated at approximately $707,980. The cost of a UV system, $512,140. So our recommendation is that we would go back with CRW, finalize, which we're almost close to having, finalize the RFP to install that, to put that out to bid. However, we got to kind of figure out how to pay for it, because this is an enterprise fund. So consequently, and then on the next page, it shows you what is the estimated cost, O&M cost, if you take the ozone versus UV, and this includes your electricity, the whole bit. So your annual cost of $14,000 for UV versus $36,500 for ozone. So there's significant annual operating cost reduction for the UV. Ozone itself can also be a dangerous thing, and components can burn out very quickly, where UV, you're talking, it's your UV lights. You have to make sure your system is functional. You need to check it on a regular basis, but you can also put it on a DDC, a direct digital control system that monitors this so that you get alarms when you're having a problem. Anytime there's a service issue with this UV system, we would already have the sodium hypochlorite system as a secondary system, so we would not be non-compliant. So our recommendation as we move forward, this is where we get into a little bit of duality for the conversation. And I think I'm going to actually ask Amy if she'll speak to some of this, but we've asked some hard questions and done some hard looking at the enterprise fund. And effectively, with Dora's numbers that she's provided us, here we have a $500,000 price tag, but we have $398,642 cash in the R&R fund. So we're asking for more money than is in R&R. So effectively, I'll drop this bomb and then Amy can take over. We're losing money running this building. We're bad landlords for ourselves.
Thanks, Dave. So KRC has a couple of things going on that I wanted the assembly to know about. One, it has about $1.52 million worth of exterior projects that need to be done on the building. through lack of maintenance or just maintenance that has caught up to us over time or whatever, including siding and some roofing and stuff like that. Then with this project, it made me start questioning the R&R fund. So Dora found us these numbers, and then she gave us a spreadsheet of how the building was doing over time. And I don't actually see that, but I have that. When we signed the new lease, from that point forward, we used to make money owning this building, and we put money into R&R over time. Since 2017, we have gone backwards between like $600 and $1 million every year.
When the
in
lease
that
was
fund.
renegotiated?
Yes, when that lease
That needs
was,
to be clarified.
yes, it was upon the lease renegotiation, when that started back up. Now, the lease that we're in is a very long-term lease, but we do get to look at it every 5 years, which is coming up next year. So we've already started the conversation with our contacts for NOAA through GSA. Alma is her name. Alma knows. I've sent her the borough powers and what the borough is responsible for and what the state guides us to do. And I'm asking her about, and explain to her what an enterprise fund is, how enterprise funds are supposed to pay for themselves, and we're not supposed to bring property tax should not be paying for discharge permits. But with the money that's in here and the cost that we have, we're outside of that scope, and that is where this is causing questions. So we'll get you a copy of that spreadsheet. I'm sorry it's not in here tonight. I have it highlighted in my office about when we started going backwards. But I don't think as an assembly member or the mayor, I knew that was happening, because it's just not information that we're presented. And so I want you guys to know that that's the situation we're in with that. And so as the mission creeps and moves and the scope of what's happening in that building moves, the cost to us as the landlords grows, and I'm not sure that's always going to be something that we can afford. So I just want to have a holistic look at what we're doing there. If that building was a gift to us, it's great. The science for the region is fantastic, but we're at a point where it's costing us a lot of money, and it's costing us beyond what it's producing. So the numbers that you have tonight, you'll see the whole cost of projects, and then you'll see a NOAA percentage that says 75.3 on that spreadsheet. That's because NOAA has 75.3% of that footprint in the building. So that's how much gets charged to NOAA's, that R&R fund that NOAA is responsible for paying into. The rest of those projects go to the borough. So we'll have more information in the future, but as we talk about this discharge permit and the care of this building, we're not set up very well to meet the needs. And so it's a bigger conversation that we need to have as we start looking at this stuff.
One of the things that I would add here too is it's fine if you want to look at a percentage of the building that's occupied by NOAA, but the cost of this is 100% responsible because of NOAA, not because of the other tenants on there, as far as the operation, as far as the disinfecting of the research water, So I'm disagreeing that it's only 73% of that. Says 75.3, thank you, of that. I think it's 100% responsibility of the 75% of the tenant. We've got the main tenant.
That's
is
just
using
not,
it.
I
The
understand
rest
what you
aren't.
mean, Mr. Mayor, but as far as how projects are billed, that's the system that's in place and has been for that whole list.
And I understand that, but what I'm saying is there's serious problems with the way things are being calculated on there. So we're going to have to figure out how this moves forward and covers itself, or look at divesting ourselves of it. So Scott and then Bo.
Who's got the other 25%?
Alaska Fish and Game,
Fish and Game also has crab research and has a captive animal permit, so that needs to be part of that equation. It is not strictly NOAA, because they do red king crab research, tanner crab research in that same facility. KRAA does not, neither does NRCS, Soil and Water Conservation. They don't have a dog in this particular fight, but it's NOAA and
Alaska
Game.
Fishing.
Yeah.
Fishing Game.
My second question is, You did not include a chlorination system in comparison with the ozone system and the UV system. Why is that?
Typically, we just didn't do it for the simple reason of the dangerous nature of sodium hypochlorite in the monitoring. It was determined, NOAA and other facilities have either UV or ozone. And in the system, for instance, in Juneau, it's both UV and ozone. There's no chlorine. We chose no chlorine simply because chlorine is an easier backup and it's sort of more friendly. We also looked at, what I didn't mention was we also did an analysis. We had a firm do an analysis on a mixing zone, and we would have loved to have just a mixing zone, but mixing zones aren't necessarily the right thing. The solution to pollution isn't necessarily dilution, unfortunately. But chlorine is a good system. It's difficult to maintain. There is a lot more potential hazard for the employee. And ironically, what we found is when NOAA disinfects their lab, they use so much of a product that has a chlorine, sodium hypochlorite base, that they over-chlorinate. So consequently, adding chlorine to chlorine, we would have to then dechlorinate before we would discharge.
Sounds like a fun game.
Thank you. Bo and then James.
So I think the primary differences between discharge for one of our canneries and this facility is, this facility, they're altering the chemical composition of the water. They're making some of these tanks far more acidic, some far less acidic, and they're also purposefully bringing in organisms that have parasites, that have diseases, and they're monitoring them for an extended period. So shoving that back out into the bay is a problem. So that's the primary difference. I mean, whether or not canneries bring in critters with these things, I'm sure it happens, but they're not doing it purposefully and then holding them there. So that's the primary difference. I can state that I agree with Amy in that there's very important research happening there for the region, and it's gaining momentum. And it is gaining a lot of momentum right now, and it's not going to slow down. So if this is a problem we need to address, and I completely agree, it's not appropriate to place the burden on taxpayers, we do need to, I think, plan for this to be a long-term situation we need to address, because this is not going away.
James.
So, sorry if I missed it, but you're saying moving forward with this, but you didn't say which one, whether it's ozone or UV. All you did was say the $500,000 option. So I'm assuming that you're saying moving forward with UV.
That's correct.
Okay, then I won't go any further on that, because I'm definitely against ozone.
Dave.
So one comment they will make on the operating in a deficit, also realize for approximately 5 years, and this wasn't a giant portion of the percentage, but it was well over $100,000, was the salary for the person to run the touch tank and the aquarium. So that was part of it, because that was removed from the previous lease negotiation. NOAA refused to pay for that salaried position. So the borough paid that out of pocket, so to speak, out of the funds that were being paid by all of those tenants to run that facility. So just realize that that was a component of that. Therefore, we came back to you a year or so ago talking about reducing hours and limiting our liability as far as costs for keeping that public portion of the facility open and staffed.
The question I have is on both the ozone and the UV. There's engineering and management. Shows construction costs under the UV of $264,000. Engineering and management, $248,000. What is that component, since it's so high?
It's services during construction and on-site inspection. We can do a certain portion of on-site inspection ourselves. We're likely going to run into having to redesign electrical as we get into it. That was also part of the issue with the current ozone system, is that whenever it was wired, you should not wire 50 hertz required equipment at 60 hertz and above. Not good for the equipment.
Okay, but I'm
Their
still,
engineering, electrical, it's support during the project.
okay, it just seems extremely high. So what is the upfront engineering cost for this RFP?
We actually have already paid for it, and I don't have that number right off the top of my head.
And I'm assuming that comes off of this.
I believe,
248.
I would have to go back and verify that. I won't
Okay.
say one way or the other.
I'm just looking at, potentially part of this has been paid, and what are we looking at on cost? And the 248 stood out as being almost half of the cost of the project, is why I raised the question.
And I can confirm that before next week.
Okay.
This is not on the agenda for next week.
Right.
This was a discussion item. At this point, we wanted to bring this up to you and possibly get some direction, feedback, which way you want to go.
Well, I think the UV is the best, and I think that's what I've heard. Jared and then Bo?
Yeah, UV sounds good too. Based on this, I'm assuming that this is not a project that can be split up into stages.
We have a now APDES permit and a requirement that within 2 years, we need to have this system in place.
Thank you. Bo?
I agree with Mr. Turner and others who are in favor of the UV system. I would imagine that if they pushed for the ozone system and we went that route, that would increase their costs on their end to have someone handle a hazmat type certification to manage that system? Or is it, just thinking like if we ask more money of the tenant to shore up things on our end, are their costs, I mean, are they arguing for a system that's going to drive their costs up as well?
I don't think they're arguing for a system at all. I think that the borough made a commitment to have a functional disinfection system 20-some years ago and never provided it, and now you're paying for it. That's my attitude, that's my opinion.
So is the ozone system something that just, I'm just going through the information, and they recommended that the ozone system, so I didn't know if that's something they were pushing for, if they're okay with UVE.
They'd be happy with a system that's compliant with the discharge permit, and unfortunately, the discharge permit belongs to the borough because we're the facility owner. We are the ones bringing and discharging the salt water into the system. They're just mucking with it in the middle.
Okay, thank you.
Scott and then Steve?
I want to thank you for this timeline. It's made it a lot clearer how long this has been a problem and where we're going with it. And I'm supportive of the UV system. Thank you.
Steve?
I'm definitely supportive of the UV system. I haven't worked around this type per se, but I've worked around water and wastewater treatment, and almost all of them have gone to UV and have tried to get away as much as possible from chlorine. And ozone, from my experience, has been kind of a nightmare. So I would very much push for the UV, and it's cheaper. So that's my position.
Bring it forward with the UV. Dave?
So I kind of feel bad. I made Jenna come out, and I talked the whole time. I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
I will say, so, and a reminder, there's going to be additional costs because we have these permits that someone's going to be having to take testing based off the permit. We have like quarterly, weekly sampling, and then also submitting this information to Alaska DEC through like NetDMR, and also they have a new system out. They want everything electronically directly sent to them as well. So that's going to be an extra cost besides just all of the equipment, is that oversight of the permit and making sure we're compliant.
Thank you. Okay, bring it forward as UV. All righty, next thing we got is packet review. There's, under public hearings, there's ordinance number 24-4, an ordinance of the Assembly of the Kodiak Island Borough amending Title II Administration and Personnel, Chapter 2.3, Rules of the Assembly, Section 2.3, Order of Speaking. James?
So I brought this forward to try and, I guess, tame the long-windedness of rambling. Trying to make a point. I know that it's hard sometimes to make a point within 5 minutes, but it'd be nice to make sure that people aren't sitting on the radio or on YouTube for until 10:30 every night, because we can't cut things short.
Any further discussion at this point? It'll be on the agenda for next week. The second public hearing is ordinance number FY 2024-11, amending Title II Administration and Personnel, Chapter 100 Boards, Committees, and Commissions, Section 2.100.040, qualifications to allow residents to serve on various boards, committees, and commissions. And this would be mine. This was non-citizens, but yet residents of the Kodiak Island Borough being on boards and commissions. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, that'll be on the agenda for next week. Next is contracts. This is contract number FY 2024-8, professional services agreement with Water Technology Incorporated for Kodiak High School pool statement of work and proposal package preparation based on the prepared evaluation. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This agreement is tied to another fun agreement that we have that is a three-way agreement with the Kodiak Island Borough School District and the City of Kodiak. It affects a lot of things, but in this regard, with operation of the pool. The last time that was signed was 2018, and we are in the process of, we've met with all of the parties. We've made our comments, and we sent our comments to the school district and the City of Kodiak. That was right before we kind of all went on holiday break, and we're waiting for their comments to come back. But the reason this is in front of you again is because it came up and there was some sentiment from assembly members that suggested we should be able to do this scope of work on our own. Part of the thing that we did in that meeting with the school district and the City of Kodiak, we said, do you have the expertise to do this? And they said no, and we said, do you have the expertise to do this? And they also said no, and we said, we do not have the expertise to do this. And so seeing that all three parties involved did not have the expertise to do this, we would like to hire an outside consultant to come in. This is someone, this WTI company is someone that was here. If you were on the assembly when they were here, you remember they got snowed in or weathered in, fogged in perhaps. They were here for several days, so he knows more about our pool than he ever intended to during that visit. And so we're looking for permission to go forward with that statement of work on the pool. We do not have funding identified for it yet, but we're getting told by so many community members how important this is to the community and what a resource this is. And so we can't add that to any kind of project list or have a plan if we don't even know how much money we're asking for. So what we're trying to do is create those shovel-ready projects so that we're ready to roll, understanding that there is a chance that there's going to be inflation or price changes or all of that. We're just looking for someone who fixes pools in Alaska for a living, comes in and looks and does this statement of work for us. So Dave's here if you happen to have any technical questions about the actual statement of work. I know many of you have seen this several times. The actual paperwork has not changed. We're just back asking if we can go ahead and do this now.
Dave, you have something you want to go ahead and say first?
Yeah, I was not able to get a hold of the gentleman from WTI because of a holiday. I will say there's an $81,400 price tag here for assistance, and this also includes on-site inspection. I would like to verify that number prior to next week. which I will do everything I can, because here we are up against another holiday. So I'll try to get a hold of these folks tomorrow and verify this number, but I think that this is the right way to go. One of the things that Assemblymember Sherritt was concerned about was that we should be able to do some of the actual work, and there was agreement that we may be able to pare this list down. The other thing we want to talk about is, are we going to look at the entire package, or do we want to go with the priorities that are listed here? My suggestion is that we go out, we get a price, we develop a statement of work for the entire package now and pay for it, because we can divide off what portions we decide if necessary. That's just my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, Scott?
Well, I'm in favor of going out for the whole enchilada on this. I think if you break it down too early, things are going to get confused in the long term. I'm questioning who's going to pay for this. Are we going to pay for it with the city and the school district, or are we hung out to dry all by ourselves?
In that meeting, so it's hard, right? Because the people, the city manager was there, the superintendent was there, and none of us have the ability to promise money because we all answer to a different board or council or assembly, right? So amongst us, we had one person say, "Oh, we don't have any money at all," and I said, "I think we have some money, but certainly not all of it." And then another person saying, "Oh, I think we have money," that I didn't expect to have money. But that conversation means very little. I can't say that we have money until the assembly says we have money, right? So it'll be interesting to see when that plays out. That's part of the reason I gave you the school board information and the funding that they were reporting in last week in last week's packet. So we kind of had an idea of what we were dealing with. And then the agreement that we have that's signed suggests that the school district is in charge of the annual pool overhaul. And for our part, it says that we will help, but it is very vague and it does not say how much or give any detail. So it'll be interesting to see how this will probably be a joint work session item with both of those different groups.
Thank you.
James? Then Steve?
I know we've asked this before, but what do we think a new pool would cost?
I'm not even going to throw a dart at that one.
Are you thinking, basically, take the tile off?
Fill it with cement.
Change, are you
Knock
looking
down
at
the
changing
building.
to a freshwater pool versus a saltwater pool?
Yes,
Okay, using the basic infrastructure, but changing the mechanical and
correct.
changing the interior of the pool.
correct. If we're not gonna do maintenance on it like we should be, I mean, a lot of the issues that were pointed out in this could have been during a annual maintenance or a quarterly maintenance been addressed, but they weren't. And what makes us think that that's gonna happen over the next 10 years after we do this? So then we're gonna be right back into the situation of redoing the pool again. A lot
I
of
agree.
a lot of the rust in the infrastructure is from the salinity, and so the building itself, the wrap around this pool is not gonna last very much longer, which some of that is in here, but not a lot. So, I mean, we're talking about concrete, we're talking about steel beams, girders, roofing. I mean, basically, if we don't do anything now, another, 3 to 5 years, we're gonna be tearing down the building anyway because it's gonna be so rusty.
Steve?
Well, I'm kind of going along with James, not necessarily new pool, but how much of this has been caused by lack of maintenance and who should have been doing the maintenance? And I don't know the agreement well enough, but I know the last pool had serious rust issues and things, and statements were made about maintenance. And I don't know the lease well enough to be able to answer that question of who's responsible for what and what allowed it to get to this shape. And should, if that is determined, should that party be somewhat responsible for making sure it's fixed?
And we haven't finished paying for it. So, Bo,
So, a couple things that are concerning to me, including something new that I just learned about, a great point about salinity and issues that's going to cause downstream of this decision, is throwing $80,000. What kind of, is there an expiration associated with that? The reason I ask is, we don't know how it's going to be paid for. That makes me very uncomfortable. And the range of estimates from this firm or company from 400 to 700,000, I'm going to automatically default to it's going to cost more. And so who's going to pay $700,000 for this? And if we haven't been having these discussions and everyone's making the same face, I'm very uncomfortable with this. I agree it's a great resource for the community, but without knowing who's going to pay for it, I'm reluctant to throw money at something that's, likely going to cost on the upper end of the estimate. And without knowing who's going to pay for it, typically people like to default towards increasing the mill rate. And I am very uncomfortable with increasing the cost of living on this community.
thank you. Further,
One question, sorry, I kept rambling after my question there.
that you
Sorry.
did.
Sorry, James. I truly am working on that.
Dave.
But I guess the question was, so if we spend the money, the 80-something thousand dollars, is there a timeline we're stuck within? Is there a roadmap associated with that, or can we wiggle around that for a while?
I think that we can do a repair at the moment, but I think that from my experience with pools, and I have a bit of experience with the pool out on the base. I was involved with retiling that pool. It's your chemical balance within the water is what damages your grout. And if you don't keep up on your grout, that is basically your waterproofing membrane. I think that at least, if not annually for small patches, it should be taken down annually for a period of time, maybe every couple of 2 years, where the grout is completely gone through, because you're now going to use an epoxy grout rather than a sanded grout, which is what you would use at home on your tile floor. You have a different animal here. I believe that when it was built, it never had a proper waterproofing membrane installed. I also believe we live in a place that has earthquakes, so consequently, you could have cracking in the concrete. It should have never had black iron pipe put in for drains. That was, I could have told you we're going to replace that the day they put it in. There's just things that were done on this pool that should not have been done. And I don't know that I actually answered your question.
Well, thank you. This has all been extremely helpful. Thank you for taking the time to package this up. Currently, I can't support this.
Scott and then James.
What happens if we change it from saltwater to freshwater?
Chlorine.
Yeah.
Basically a different chemical, although let's say chlorine can be made, sodium hypochlorite can be made by utilizing salt and converting it, which is what a lot of water treatment plants do. Now is when I could use Jenna. But that's what a lot of the plants actually do, I know, out on the base. They've gone, when I first started on the base, that was a gaseous form of chlorine that we treated the water with. Now it's a salt solution that is converted, I believe, electronically, some type of electrical pass-through to convert to a sodium hypochlorite type solution as the treatment agent. So it's not like you're bringing in big tubs of chlorine like you would, at home, so to speak.
Well, I guess part of my question was, if we continue with a saline environment in there, are we going to continue to get the kind of maintenance issues that we're talking about here? And if we switch to a chlorination system, would we avoid those?
I don't think so. I think if you look at most of the pools that are being built these days, larger pools, they are actually saline pools because it's healthier for the individual swimming in it. I would also say that you're talking about two different things. You're talking about what is your style of management and how are you going to hold people to something versus a physical structure. So I think you need to separate that.
Okay, thank you.
James?
So, I'm gonna answer my own question. A pool, built last year in Lamar, Texas, was built for $10.7 million, competition size of 123 feet by 75 feet, with 542,719 gallons and 600 spectator seats. A depth of 3.6 at the shallow end to 13.6 feet in the deep diving end, and 3-meter springboard and two 1-meter springboards for $10.7 million. It's also not chlorinated or salt. It is UV treated. And so, again, we're talking about UV instead of any other chemical. And so that is their competition in Lamar.
Solution.
Mhm.
Okay. Something I'm going to say here, I'm going to suggest that we pull it off of the agenda. And the reason being, on the 16th of January, we got a meeting to try and schedule a joint work session with this city, and sometime in the not too distant future here, we're going to be looking at trying to do a joint work session with the school district. And I think we should have some of these discussions before we authorize a contract that we don't know who's helping with. What do you guys think? Okay, Steve?
Well, I think that, yes, we do need to have discussion with both the city and the school district to make sure that 5-10 years down the road, we're not dealing with the same issue. And so therefore, if it does get funded, it gets fixed up, whatever needs to be done, are adequate measures going to be in place so we're not doing the same thing 5 to 10 years? And that should be part of that discussion, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so what's the wishes of the assembly? Jared?
I think I'm okay with postponing until we have these joint work sessions or soon. But I think that if they're, if they don't happen, then this needs to come back onto the agenda.
Okay. So at this time, it'll be pulled from the agenda, and we'll work on the joint work sessions. One of them, like I said, we already got a meeting to come up with the agenda, and we'll be doing another one. Dave?
So one item I will bring up, and I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture here by any means, but there was discussion during that meeting that there are certain grants available. However, you have to apply for a grant before you get a grant. Virginia Graham Act is an act that was put through by federally, where if you have to replace the drains every so many years, there is funding available through that. And Corey Grahn stated in that meeting that there's actually a couple of grants through the state. I'm not sure that it's going to cover the entire amount.
Okay. No problem. Those are suggestions, and I think we're going to find, as we continue to look at it, we're going to find other things that got to be addressed on this. So we'll go ahead and move on. Next is the resolution on the CIP list, which we've already talked about. Then there's the ordinance for introduction. This is ordinance number FY 2024-13, amending Title III Revenue and Finance, Chapter 3.30, Contract, Purchase, Sale, and Transfer Procedures, and Section 3.30.020, limitation on manager's authority to increase the spending authority from $25,000 to $150,000 for the enterprise fund. Staff report, Amy?
I think this is coming from Assemblymember Griffin
Oh.
tonight.
Jared gets to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for postponing this from the previous work session when I was more sick than I am today. That is a story. And also, thank you, Scott, for putting this on. I know that's something you're kind of critical of, and so I do appreciate you putting this on here for us to talk about. So this has come from work on the Health Facilities Advisory Board. That's where it's kind of stemmed from. The last time that the manager's spending limitation was increased to 25,000 was about 20 years ago. And so today, 25,000 is really closer between 45 and 50,000 today. So, there's that warrant, at least, to look at increasing it because of inflationary matters. And then also, we should look, I think, to increasing it more to kind of inflation-proof it if we need for the next 20 years. Who knows what inflation is going to look like, right, in 20 years. But so putting it closer to 100,000. And then I was looking at the scope of projects. If you look at all of the, upcoming R&R and things that need to be done at the health facility there that Providence is running for us, coming down the pike, I don't think it's that unreasonable to look at 150,000 cap again just for the enterprise fund. And kind of the guiding principle behind this is to avoid conditions that would hinder or prohibit Providence or whoever else is leasing that building from providing health care, as it refers to safety, accreditation issues, just the scope of healthcare services, right? And so this would help, increasing this would help fast track some of these repair and renewal projects that absolutely need to happen, and some of them have been in dire states. And again, this is just a suggestion. I'm open to friendly, amendments. I would really like, even if it's something like 100,000, and then we can put something in there, that anything that the manager has bought over 25,000, the assembly is notified. But hopefully, like with the pool, right? This helps us maybe have a bigger conversation about an aging facility and the conversation we've had about the elevators too, right? How much do we want to how many Band-Aids do we want to fund for the hospital, or do we want to start to extend its life, or really start looking at replacing the whole thing? But we really won't know that information until later. But I think this is something that we can do to help the renewal, the repair process, the procurement process for Providence, for Amy, and for Dave. So that's where all that came from.
Okay, thank you. Dory, you want to speak first?
I just want to say, most of our leases for facilities like this are restricted as to how the money can be spent anyway. So
Right.
for the Providence, for the long-term care center as well, so if you're gonna, the same requirements and things that you mentioned for accreditation and healthcare and speed due to the nature of their mission would apply to the long-term care center as well. But again, most of those leases are restricted to what we can spend it for. So it wouldn't be off-script purchasing a lot for those two funds, so.
Yeah, it's very restricted. Thank you, Dory.
Scott?
Well, I'm supportive of this. I think the 150,000 is a little eager. And if it was a twofold increase in the past 20 years in inflation, then maybe another twofold in the next 20 years would be fine. And 100 grand, if you bump it from 25 grand to 100 grand, that's fine with me. I could support that.
Bo?
Thank you. I agree. There's, you know, being how long it's been since it's been updated, you know, some adjusting for inflation is appropriate. I also feel that time spent in this, during these meetings, nitpicking smaller spending amounts could be better used elsewhere. I'm uncomfortable with 150, despite limitations that are associated with that spending. I do feel we should, and the reason I say that is I don't question the manager's judgment, but this is something that all managers, present and future, will have the authority to do. And I'm also concerned about, does this prevent us from prioritization of spending in any way? I'm unsure if giving someone the ability, any manager, this level of spending authority, they're prioritizing. Perhaps, this is what I'm unsure of, and what makes me a little uncomfortable with that amount is, does that remove the ability for us to help prioritize how that spending, or when that spending happens? So I'm uncomfortable with the amount. I do think it should go up to account for inflation, and I trust Amy's judgment for making expenditures, and we don't need to spend all that time in here, but I would like to see a smaller amount.
James?
So I am probably one of the only negatives on this. I'm not in favor of 150,000, and it's not because of the manager that we have. We put her in there because we do trust her. It's future managers that trouble me, because past managers have, let's say, got funny with some of the abuse, yeah. I would agree on increases is something that we should do. 50 would be more reasonable, but 150, we're talking about completely bypassing the assembly for anything under 150. So when we talk about all the small projects, there's a reason why we're here, and that is to talk about the small ones, the big ones, and the ones in between. So I think 50 would be more reasonable.
Steve?
I'm definitely in favor of an increase. I think we need to discuss a little about how much. And I would also like to see some wording that every 5 years it's reviewed, so it doesn't go 20 years.
Well, this is what we're going to discuss.
So I'm thinking at least 50 and not more than 100, and I'm open to other proposals. Thank you.
Jared?
So, Amy, did you want to? So how would something like, 100,000 and then have language in there to maybe help address some of the prioritization and, assembly input concerns, put in language in there that, purchases over 25 or over 50K, there must be some like official notification at the very next regular meeting after that purchase is made, so that there's some oversight and some some feedback there. That's just an idea, but.
Let's see. Amy, did you have something you want to say?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the flexibility in the 150,000 because I know how often those projects come in and how high those numbers are and how urgent some of those projects are. But the beauty of our system is if it's an emergency and it needs taken care of, I can just sign it right away. and then tell the assembly about it afterwards. But since we're talking about this $50,000 level, I think that the manager's spending authority should be raised to $50,000. Over the last 20 years, we're at like $1.95 or something like that compared to what it was 20 years ago. So that $25,000 doesn't buy us very much now. So I would be more interested in having the manager's authority going up to $50,000 across everything. I think that and then I know that the assemblies have adjusted that based on personalities of the managers in the past. If that's out of control and I stop reporting and you want to put reins on me, it can be changed back. But I think that's a more appropriate number to do business that the borough is doing every day, just across. I think the city has just raised the city managers as well.
Yeah, something I'll add there, and then I'll get to you, Bo. The city talked to, actually, when they introduced raising it, they raised it to 75, and that failed on there. It was basically amended to 50, and went to 50. My feeling, I can support 50. I don't support any more across the board, and the reason being is, as we've been seeing on some of these design projects, you can take a $150,000 design and obligate us to $2 million. And you'll also remember all of our enterprise funds have shortfalls. We don't have the money in the enterprise funds to make the basically improvements that we need to make. And so it's up to the assembly to make those determinations on the priority there. So that's why I can back Amy on the 50 across the board. I can't go any farther. So kind of what's the thought process? Because I've heard 150, 100, and 50-50. Bo?
Just another follow-up question. Have we run into this, is there any recent scenarios to where the current process, and again, I'm supportive of increasing it, but I'm curious with the current process, have we run into any scenarios where accreditations lapsed or critical services weren't provided? I mean, this is, I'm just trying to weigh like how important
It wasn't
is-
because of this. It was because of them bringing things 3 years after the fact to us. That was the problem. It was ridiculous.
Okay.
An emergency on their part due to lack of letting us know for 3 years. They've been written up on it for 3 years, and then we find out, because they've got a 45-day limit that they've got to get it corrected in. You know, that's a problem.
Right.
But-
Yeah, I'm just trying to weigh the time sensitivity and
Yeah.
how, how much that comes into play as far as when you say, if there's something, emergency that happens, is this process or something, maybe not necessarily a critical emergency, but something that's very important and time sensitive, are we going to be bogging this down, and how often that happens? It doesn't sound like quite often.
Scott?
I think the issue is that you can't buy very much with 25,000 anymore. If the manager does not have signing authority over 25,000, then we have to decide on it, and it crowds our calendar, and we're not doing what we should be doing because we're playing pickup on $25,000 at a time. And so that's one reason to change the amount. There seems to be a division between people saying 100 grand and people saying 50 grand. I'll compromise at 75.
So, further discussion? Let's move it forward at 50.
James, I think had something there.
Oh, James?
So I do like the comment that the manager made, which was across the board instead of just enterprise. And the ordinance reads enterprise only.
So remove this one and
So
have a new one
I would
drafted?
say that the ordinance itself, 3.30.020, does not specifically state enterprise funds. It's just this ordinance, 2024-13, that states the enterprise fund. So really all you have to do is scratch the enterprise fund on line 8 and 12.
we can give direction to the clerk
And then
to
it's,
fix
and
it
then it's done.
and come back with the 50.
And then come back with 50.
Yeah. Directions given, Lena. Need any further? Okay. Then we'll move on to, next item is other items, confirmation of mayoral and assembly appointments to the different boards, committees, and commissions. I've been soliciting, trying to fill the different boards and committees and making phone calls, and people have come in and signed up on them. So you have different things and you have their applications there. Any discussion, James?
How many of them are non-registered voters in this list?
One, Doug Mathers, Architecture Review Board. So we approved the allowing non-resident to be
If,
on. Right, if you do it, then he's the one who, it's at the end of the meeting here that
Yeah.
he's then appointed to.
that's pretty close to,
Yes, sir. So, any other comments? Okay, this will come forward and we'll have further discussion on things. Next item is the manager's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, staffing updates. We are still hiring for a payroll technician and a general accountant in finance, and we still are hiring for an appraiser technician in assessing. So if you're looking for a job the new year, there's some good options out there for you. We do have a couple of applicants in for that appraiser technician job, and we have a new accounts payable technician starting in finance in January. One thing I want to make sure that everyone knew is that the Solid Waste Advisory Board and our engineering facilities staff is partnered with Boy Scout Troop 626 to collect your Christmas tree when you're done with it on Saturday, January 6th. They will come to your house and pick it up for free. It has to be a natural tree and it has to be bare because we're going to grind it up and use it for cover at the landfill. So please take your decorations off. If you'd like your tree picked up, you can call 907-512-9908 or contact them on Facebook. They are on Facebook as Kodiak Troop 626. A reminder to everyone who's interested in applying for senior citizen or disabled veteran property tax exemption, forms are due no later than the close of business on January 16th. January 15th is the date we say over and over, but that is a Sunday, so SEMA's here. We will take them until 5 p.m. on the 16th. So you get an extra day this year. Let's get them in. We will be making some phone calls to people who we haven't heard from. So hopefully we'll get those more of those taken care of earlier. I gave you two different things from the same litigation case tonight. So you'd have the update on those new rulings. And one of the conversations that's come up recently is the care of our airport parking lot. This is the answer in blue on that sheet that we got back, so you can see how that's being taken care of. And to my right over here, you will see what's left of our gingerbread house contest. Engineering Facilities took first place with the Russian Orthodox Church here. Seema, who's in the back corner, got first place for her door decoration contest. We had a lot of good ones. Engineering Facilities got an overall award for just their offices. They are amazing. If you haven't been back in the Borough building, there is a door with all of your faces on it that you should check before it gets torn down. And Assessing won the overall door contest for all the different, they had a bunny shoot, they had snowmen, they had all movie themed Rudolph in the Dark. It was a really great morale event that we had, and we had a cookie contest on Friday. So it was nice to see the staff get together and enjoy some holidays before we went off. And we are going to be doing a potluck next Friday, January 5th, around lunchtime. If you're able to come, we'd love to have you. And that's the short and sweet holiday version tonight.
And the cookies were great. So next is the clerk's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Assembly. So I just have a couple things. We are processing a transfer of liquor license for Cost Savers. It's just a transfer of ownership. So that's on the agenda for February 1st, I think, public hearing. There's over 100 notices that will be going out prior to that, to the 1,500 1,500 radius from Cost Savers. So there's quite a lot of properties in that area. And our GIS analyst was really quick to get us that list, so I have everything prepped. So when I get back from my trip, I'm just going to put everything in an envelope and mail it out. For records projects, we have still been working diligently, making corrections to folders in Laserfish, which is our electronic record software. Backtracking, correcting, adding records and information that were missing in our files. This summer, we also changed the clerk's retention schedule, so we did not foresee all the work that would need to be done in Laserfish with renaming the folders. And in renaming folders, you have to change the pathways and the workflows. So Mitchell has been great helping us with Laserfish and the backside of Laserfish, which we're not familiar with, because we changed it from BC to CL. So we have to rename everything. And so all the workflows have to be renamed. So it's an ongoing project. But we've been tag teaming it. Nova, Irene, and I have been going in there. And again, Mitchell has been phenomenal. He's incredibly helpful. And then we are continuing to work with our department directors regarding records retention series revisions. The finance department records series revision was going to be scheduled for the next meeting. However, we did run into a couple other things in reviewing previous revisions to all the departments. So we put that on the back burner, and we'll continue that after the holidays. And then we've been reviewing archived contracts in Laserfish, and we have been able to produce a new format for naming contracts, extensions, amendments, and change orders. We also have a new form. Amy participated and has helped us out with that as well. In trying to streamline that process for expiring contracts and leases and such, we are also incorporating expiration dates, review dates in Laserfish now. So we're trying to maximize the ability to use Laserfish. So there's a lot of different ways that we can utilize that software, and we haven't been maximizing that. So we're going back and inputting all those dates so that we can produce a list to provide to the manager and the departments with expired contracts to look at and say, hey, can we purge this and empty out a bunch of folders in Laserfish, and also physical contracts too, because I do still have a lot of paper, Scott, in my office of previous contracts. So it's a work in progress, and it's going to take some time because we have to go through every contract and incorporate that information. And some of them do require us to actually fully read the contract and figure out expiration dates or termination dates and base that retention on the expiration date. So every time there's an amendment or an extension, that starts over. So it's been a little bit tedious, but I've been able to go through, and we've tag teamed it again. So I'm doing from 2014 to 2024. And then I think Irene is doing 2004 to 2013, and Nova's doing the oldest ones. So she is finding that has been a little bit more challenging than the newer contracts. But again, it's a work in progress, and we're so grateful for Mitchell's help. And after last week's regular meeting, we were able to clear up 23 spaces in our records room because we purged 23 boxes. Some were confidential, some were recycled items. So Threshold did come in yesterday and pick up 2 of those green containers full of records, in addition to bags full of shredded documents. And Irene and I were able to get all those done this week. So even though it's been a short week. And I think that is it. Reminder to please send travel dates if you're traveling or taking time off for upcoming continued holidays. There's an AML Winter Legislative Conference in February, and there's a Cook Inlet Regional Citizens Advisory Council meeting in April. So if you guys are interested, if any of you are interested in attending any of those, please notify the clerk's office so we can put your travel authorization forms together. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Next item is assembly member comments. We'll start with you, James.
No comment.
Steve.
No comment.
Jared.
Happy New Year.
Bo.
Happy New Year and good luck to the Kodiak Bears in their ongoing basketball tournament that's happening right now. Thank you again, Amy, for your help this week. I'm bummed I missed the cookies, and SEMA open offer. If you need help with those phone calls, I'm very willing to do that, so please let me know.
Thank you. Scott.
I wish it wasn't so cold. I'm tired of the cold. I'm going to move to Florida. Happy holidays.
Cool. Mayor's comments. I have received a request from ACS Communications, Alaska Communications. What it is in regards to is they're partnering with Old Harbor Native Corporation to apply for an NTIA grant to bring fiber to Chiniak, Woman's Bay, Old Harbor, and Akiak on Kodiak Island. And they would appreciate a letter of support. With your concurrence, we can put this on the agenda for next Thursday. What's your wishes? Okay. All right, thumbs up. We'll put it on the agenda. So we'll get approval. So, and the only other thing I have is Happy New Year's. Be careful. Work session adjourned at 8:11. Thank you all.
There was another accident at